Senator Ted Cruz is with us. How are you, Senator?
Sean, how are you doing? Today, it's some of the darkest 24 hours in our nation's history.
I couldn't say it more eloquently. I loved your comments yesterday. We said, hey, listen, they're not calling balls and strikes. They've joined the team, and the team is hurting Americans. And you said if they want, they can retire from the court, and if they want to write laws, they can become legislators like you are.
That is exactly right. Yesterday and today were both naked and shameless judicial activism. It is neither decision. The decision yesterday, rewriting Obamacare.
For the second time.
For the second time, 6 justices joined the Obama administration. You now have Barack Obama, Kathleen Sebelius, and 6 justices responsible for forcing this failed disaster of a law on millions of Americans and simply rewriting the law in a way that is fundamentally contrary to their judicial oaths. And then today, this radical decision purporting to strike down the marriage laws of every state, it has no connection to the United States Constitution. They are simply making it up. It is lawless, and in doing so, they have undermined the fundamental legitimacy of the United States Supreme Court.
What recourse, people keep asking me, what recourse is available? The only thing that I can think of, I go back to Levin's book, The Liberty Amendments, and that is, Convention of the States. I don't know what other recourses available. Can you think of any?
Yeah, there are a number of recourses we have. Let's focus both on substance and then the broader structural problem of the lawless court. On substance, on marriage, I've introduced a constitutional amendment that would protect the authority of state legislatures to define marriage as a union of one man and one woman. We should pass that amendment. I've also introduced legislation stripping the federal courts of jurisdiction over legal assaults on marriage. The Constitution explicitly gives Congress the power to strip jurisdiction as a check on a lawless judiciary. We should use that. Now, the sad thing, Sean, is there aren't a whole lot of Republicans in Congress willing to stand and fight on either one of those.
You mean like when every other congressman and senator that was a Republican made a promise they'd repeal and replace health care, and they kept voting symbolically to do it, and then when you stood up and you said, no, we're going to use the power of the purse, and you filibustered, and then you became a pariah for being the one person that had the courage to do what they promised to do but didn't have the courage to do? You mean that group of people?
That is exactly the group of people. It's what I call the Washington cartel. It is a bipartisan coalition of career politicians in both parties, arm in arms with the lobbyists and the corruption of Washington.
You mean the same Republicans that ended up funding Obama's executive amnesty when they said that when they passed the Cromnibus they wouldn't fund the Department of Homeland Security, and then they caved and funded executive amnesty? Those people?
That's exactly the ones. And the sad truth of it is leadership supports each of those decisions. A lot of Republicans put out statements today saying they were unhappy, and they were crying crocodile tears because privately they're celebrating and popping champagne. They're thrilled, number one, that the court didn't throw Obamacare back in the laps of Congress because they don't want to actually stand up and do anything to stop it. And they were overjoyed at the marriage decision because they don't want to defend marriage and they're running away from it. And it is fundamentally dishonest and corrupt. Now, we have substantive remedies on marriage. On Obamacare, the one silver lining of yesterday's decision is the court has now made 2016 a referendum on repealing Obamacare. And if you're a 2016 presidential candidate and you're not prepared to stand up and lead that fight and campaign every day on repealing every word of Obamacare, then you need to get out of the way because that's what this election is all about.
Senator, I am very disappointed, more disappointed. This week we had Mark Meadows on the program. We had this young Congressman Buck from Colorado who was about to lose his position as president of the freshman class of congressmen, and Congressman Meadows lost the position on a committee that he has since gotten back after coming on this program and putting pressure on these guys. We literally have, I think, a Congress, this cartel as you call them, that unfortunately, I'm more disappointed in them because they won't use the power of the purse to defund Obamacare. They wouldn't use the power of the purse to to stop executive amnesty. And I'm thinking, we elected you people to take a stand here. And then you took a stand on this very issue of Obamacare, and somehow you're the bad guy. And I'm trying to understand, where did we go wrong here?
The only answer, the only way to change it is to take power out of Washington and back to the people. And it's why structurally, look, the other check that the framers put to judicial tyranny was the power of impeachment. Under the Constitution, judges and justices serve during good behavior. By no measure is this good behavior. But here's the sad reality. A Senate that is willing to confirm Loretta Lynch, an attorney general who told the Senate she won't follow the law and won't follow the Constitution, there's no universe in which this United States Senate, with this leadership, would be willing to marshal 67 votes to impeach Justice Kennedy.
I don't even think. I think you can add John Roberts to the list myself, but that's my own personal opinion. He's the one that promised to call balls and strikes, isn't he?
Well, and he certainly didn't do that. He not only was not an umpire, he jumped onto one of the teams and became effectively a member of the Obama administration, rewriting the laws. The president's been doing that for a long time, but it's sad to see judges.
So the reality is, you do have a constitutional ability to impeach these judges, but it's never going to happen, is what you're saying.
This Senate is not going to do it. And so I think we need to look at broader, more systemic structural reforms. 20 states have adopted retention elections for judges. When they face state judges who were doing what the Supreme Court is doing, disobeying the law, 20 states put in place, and we've seen in the states that system has worked well. So, for example, in California in 1986, when justices repeatedly contorted the state constitution to outlaw capital punishment, the people of California removed 3 activist justices in 1986. Nebraska, likewise, they did that when the Supreme Court justice voted to end term limits. And in 2010, the voters in the state of Iowa removed 3 justices who had done just what the U.S. Supreme Court did, which is wrongfully decreed same-sex marriage. And I think we need to look to fundamental structural changes such as periodic retention elections. And if Congress won't act to adopt a fundamental structural amendment like that, I think you're going to see more and more movement for an Article 5 Convention of the States, because the men and women of America are fed up with politicians in Washington who won't listen and won't lift a finger to stop this lawlessness.
I got to tell you, I like all of these ideas. I spent a lot of time, Senator, the last 2 days reading the dissents of Antonin Scalia specifically, also Justice Thomas today. For a Supreme Court justice in his opening paragraph of dissent to say, today's decree says that my ruler and the ruler of 320 million Americans coast to coast is a majority of 9 lawyers on the Supreme Court. And he went on to say, he called it a threat to American democracy. That it should take people's breath away.
I commend Justice Scalia's dissent to everyone listening. You're right. He points out this is a fundamental threat to democracy. And I'll tell you, he closes the dissent by saying hubris is sometimes defined as o'erweening pride, and pride, we know, goeth before the fall. With each decision of ours, the courts, that takes from the people a question properly left to them, we move one step closer to being reminded of our impotence. What he's saying, and this is stunning, he's a Supreme Court justice that is saying the Supreme Court of the United States is no longer legitimate. They are making it up. This is not law, and this is not our Constitution.
Senator, I think this should be a big part of the campaign. We're looking forward. We haven't had you on in a while. I hope we can spend some time out of the campaign trail with you. I know you're doing well in fundraising. I read that you have a lot of big donors, and you raised a lot of money, and there's a lot of support to your campaign. You've been rising in the polls. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. The support has been incredible. We've seen just in the first few months between the campaign and the Super PAC, we've raised over $40 million cash in the bank. Over 100,000 people. Over 100,000 people have gone to tedcruz.org, and supported the campaign. June 30th is the big fundraising deadline, and so we're making a hard $1 million money bomb at tedcruz.org between now and June 30th. And what's at the heart of the campaign is what you and I are talking about. Yeah. Taking power out of the Washington cartel and back to the American people. You know what's striking, Sean?
Yeah, real quick.
How many of the presidential candidates today issued statements on the marriage decision that basically said the court has spoken, the issue is over, it's time to move on?
No, it's not.
They sounded like Barack Obama. It was heartbreaking. And I have to say, I look at some of these folks and think, could you grow a backbone?
I keep saying we need a spine transplant for these Republicans in Congress, and I think we're on the same page. Senator, thank you for being with us. I think you brought up some great ideas. I hope they are pursued with vigor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my friend. God bless.